You're listening to the Oracle Talk Radio Network.
Hello, I'm Sabrina Carpenter.
I'm Dasha.
Hey, I'm Billie Eilish.
What's up, guys? I'm Camila Cabello.
Hey, this is Tate McRae.
I love this station.
I love this station.
You're listening to Chasing Prophecy Radio, where we discuss anything and everything beyond the scope of normal. On the Oracle Talk Radio Network. Broadcasting live in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia.
If it's unexplainable, we're talking about it.
Whether you're a believer or a skeptic,
we cover everything where the unknown becomes the known.
And now, here are your hosts, Jennie, Nicassio, and Tom Callway.
Welcome to Chasing Prophecy live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm Jennie Nicassio. We're live on the Oracle Talk Radio Network. Tonight's going to be a really cool show. But first, before I get into that, I just want to say we have a new Pope. And I'm Catholic, so it means a lot to me. And the fact that he's American, that's even better. So we'll discuss a little bit about at the end of the show with, I have a wonderful guest tonight. So a man dies in a brutal crash, loses his wife and his child. But what happens next will leave you questioning about everything. Jeffrey Olsen saw the other side and he heard voices, felt peace, and returned with a message from beyond. And this isn't just a near-death story. It's a wake-up call for the soul. So don't miss it, you guys. We're broadcasting live on multiple platforms on the Facebook page, YouTube, Rumble. I think we're on X. I'm not sure about Facebook, and this is also if you're listening on the recorded message. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my messages right now. If you're listening on the recorded broadcast, I want you to know that you can definitely learn more about our guest. So wait for the end. Don't go anywhere because you're going to learn a lot about him. But first, I'm going to go ahead and bring on our fabulous co-host. Is back on the show. John Ventry he's a what? John, you've been here for a lot. How you filled in for me for almost, oh my goodness. Let's see, 6 months, was it? I don't remember. It was a long time.
I was on the better part of a year with you, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever it was.
Yeah, it was fun. John, You've been doing a lot lately. You want to fill us in what you've been doing before we get started with our guest, Jeffrey?
Yeah, I get inspired. I did the UFO conference here in Pittsburgh, and it was a smashing success. 175 people, great lineup. Everything went great. We had the college open up the cafe for us, so there was food. Everything was good. Then I got this idea to write a book. I was actually talking with Bill Burns. We did a Zoom call just a half hour ago. We're trying to put something together, and I came up with this idea called Alien 911, UFO crashes, injuries, and deaths. And the more I thought about it, we loved the title. I just sat down in I don't know, 2 weeks, I wrote a book because I have all this information in my other 11 books.
Definitely.
I just had to pull it out of 4 or 5 different books and put it
all
together.
Hi, Joe.
Yeah, and do some other research. And then yesterday morning, I get this epiphany. You got to write this other book because you know all of these little known facts about UFOs and the paranormal. And I have that in a couple of books also. So I'm pulling that all together and putting it in a book that's going to be called Do You Know? Should You Know? UFOs and the Paranormal.
Do you want to know?
Yeah, another cool title. So it's like I said.
Yeah, that's awesome. You can do that fast.
Yeah, after book number 6, I said, I'm done. I'm not writing anymore. Well, this is book 13.
Well, I don't know how you do it. I only have 7, so I don't know how you get that far. Yeah. That's a crazy. You went to Egypt. You had an amazing time there. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was a great trip with Creation Ministries. You can't do any better than that trip. And then last week I went to Puerto Rico for 6 days. I got an uncle down there that fell and hit his head, and
that's sad.
So 2 of my cousins and I, we went down there. We just spent 6 days eating, watching baseball, and Netflix.
That's awesome.
It was good.
Kurt said hello. He's good to see you. We're going to have a great show, guys. And if you could do me a favor and share the link, I'd appreciate it because that really helps us grow and more people get to know. But without further ado, while people are just, I hate to start right now because till the people start really floating in, but we got a time schedule, so we have to. But we have a fabulous guest. He's an international best-selling author, speaker, survivor of a tragic accident that claimed the lives of his wife and son and nearly his own life. And after flatlining in the ER, Jeff experienced a profound near-death experience that took him beyond this world. He encountered divine beings, felt overwhelming peace, and received a mission to return. His story has been featured on Fox Nation, Gia TV, I think I'm saying that wrong, Coast to Coast AM, and more. Today, Jeff inspires millions with his message of healing, hope, and life after death. Without further ado, welcome to Chasing Prophecy, Jeffrey. And I know I'm messing up your last name. Could you pronounce that for me?
It's
Orland?
Olsen. Yeah.
Olsen? Okay.
Olsen.
I wasn't sure. Well, it's good to have you here. Like I was telling you before the show, when I saw your YouTube, you were on another podcast and it came by my FYP. It literally had me crying. I mean, I was so moved. And then I said, I have to have him on the show. So that's when I went ahead and contacted you because I think, I've heard so many near-death experiences on Chasing Prophecies in the last 6 years, but your story touched me like no other has. So what was the first thing you remember after dying? Was this, I know this how it started. You went to visit your mother-in-law and your wife was leaving and she went back and said goodbye again. Just give us a little background. I'm going to put the camera on Jeff just for the first 5 minutes. If you can just give us, before we get into the deep questions, because I do have a lot for you, but I think it's better that you tell the story the way you told it. I saw it, but it was beautiful. But the floor is yours.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Jenny, and John as well. It's a pleasure and honor to be with you. And I am, willing and happy to share the story. It took a while. I mean, I didn't speak of it for a decade. It was too painful, too personal, and yet all things seem to come about for the highest good. So, yeah, it was an interesting family vacation. We had gone down to see both my mother-in-law and father-in-law. It was my wife's parents, and it was the Easter weekend. So we'd celebrated Easter, as we traditionally did with the family. And Monday morning came, and yes, we were just pulling away from the house. I had loaded our boys in the car and put them in their car seats. I'd got all the luggage in the back, and we were ready to go. And there was mom and dad waving, on the porch as they do. And I was just pulling away from the curb when my wife, Tamara, said, "Wait, stop." And I thought she had forgotten something. I thought she was going to say, "I left my bag in the bedroom," or whatever. But she looked at me and she said, "I just want to say goodbye to mom and dad one more time." Now, I'll admit in that moment, I thought, oh my gosh, let's go. We've said our goodbyes. I'm missing a day of work. Let's get on the road and get home. But I watched and I noticed as she jumped out of the car, she ran up to the porch and she not only hugged, but she kissed them both. And I noticed that, and that was not out of the ordinary. But as she ran back to the car and jumped in and buckled up and we took off, that's become very, very relevant to me because that truly was the last goodbye, given how the day played out. Now, the reason I bring up that story, the reason I bring up that experience, she must have had a thought. She must have had a feeling, call it an impression, an intuition. But for her to say, "Stop, wait, I've got to go say goodbye to mom and dad one more time," I think it was deeper than a whim. Now, she jumped in the car. I took the car out on the interstate. I cranked it up to 75 miles per hour. And away we went home. 75 miles an hour is as fast as I could legally go. I'm driving up the road. I'm thinking about all the things I'm missing. Oh gosh, there's these things, this meeting. I was running my own business, my own advertising agency. A lot of moving parts. And that's where I was just in my head thinking. I mean, I trust you've done that. It's that to-do list, as you're driving down the road. And there was reports of crosswinds. There was reports of a pickup truck that was driving erratically on the interstate. One of the hardest parts of sharing this story is I believe what actually happened is that I think I just dozed off for a second, just nodded off. And there's no excuse for that. I mean, I was a young man. I was only 33 years old. I was a young father. I was running a business. I was working those 12, 14, 16-hour days. Doesn't matter. I believe what happened is I just nodded off for a second. But in doing that, I swerved to the right. I overcorrected to the left. And the car began to roll, not off the road, but down the road at 75 miles per hour. It was a horrific automobile accident. Now, I had checked, the rearview mirror. I was aware of what was going on before the crash happened. Actually, Spencer, my 7-year-old, was playing with action figures. My youngest son, Griffin, just a toddler, only 14 months old, he was sound asleep in his car seat. And Tamara, my wife, she had reclined her seat back, and she was sound asleep, but she was still holding onto my hand. So as this all takes place, that's my last memory. And yet, boy, when I lost control and the force of 75 miles an hour rolling down the hard concrete of the interstate, I blacked out for the actual rolling and the crash. I knew I'd lost control. I knew we were crashing, but I kind of blacked out for all the rolling. But when the car came to a stop, I was completely conscious. And the first thing I heard was my 7-year-old, my oldest son, crying hysterically in the back seat of the car. Now, as a father, my first thought was, I've got to get to my boy. I have got to get to my son. But that's when I realized I couldn't move. I was pinned either to the floorboard or the seat. I was a bit disoriented. There was all the broken glass. And I actually was unaware of my injuries. I knew I was struggling to breathe. I knew that there was pain, but the adrenaline, far overshadowed the pain. And I was fighting to keep conscious. What had actually happened is both of my legs had been crushed and shattered. My left leg was eventually amputated above the knee. My right arm had almost been torn off. I mean, the whole rotator cuff, it was out of socket. The right arm had nearly been torn off. And then the seat belt had cut through and ruptured all my insides. Also, my rib cage had been damaged and my lungs were collapsing. I was a mess, but I was unaware of that. All I knew is my son is crying. I've got to get to my boy. But that's when the brutal reality hit that no one else was crying. And I became acutely aware at the scene of the accident that both Tamara, my wife, and Griffin, my youngest son, were gone. They were killed instantly in the accident. And I won't go into the details of what I saw and experienced, but I knew in that moment. And that's about the darkest hell, a man could be in. I mean, here I was pinned, losing consciousness. I've got a hysterical 7-year-old in the back seat. Half the family's gone, and I was driving the car. I kept thinking, can't I get those 3 seconds back? What happened? And I don't share that to be morbid or graphic, but it's in that darkness. It was in that absolute horror, that panic, that I felt light come. And I say that like I felt literal, tangible light. It's like light came and surrounded me. It was comforting. It was, and it felt as if I was rising above the accident scene. And I was a little bit confused. Suddenly it's like, gosh, I can breathe. I'm not in pain. And I even was having thought, how can I be okay? How can I be okay? And then in that light, in all this light, it felt like a bubble of light, like a holding place of light. suddenly Tamara, my wife, was there with me, and she was very much alive. Now, the contrast of knowing she was gone in the accident, and then here she is, beautiful, gorgeous, radiant. She wasn't displaying any of the injuries that she had suffered in the crash. She was absolutely beautiful and very much alive, and yet emphatic. Jeff, you got to go back. You got to go back. You can't come. You can't stay. And we literally had a conversation. For whatever reason, she knew she could not come back. But we talked about this. It's like, look, if you stay with me, our little 7-year-old, our oldest son, is going to be orphaned. And he's going to be okay. But you got to go back. You got to go take care of our boy. You've got to go raise our child. And we had this conversation. Now, I learned a lot about choice. I mean, here I was looking at the woman I loved more than life. And yet I knew I had a little boy in that back seat who was going to be okay. And we made a decision. We made a deal. And I chose to come back. Now, that's the most profound goodbye I may ever say. And it's so interesting how powerful our thoughts are. I didn't have to figure out, well, how do I come back? It was the intention. It was the thought. Okay, all right, I'm going back. And then whoosh, it's like suddenly I found myself moving about a very busy level 1 emergency trauma center. I have no concept of time in this bubble of light. I mean, I later found out people arrived at the scene of the accident, one of which was even a doctor. Spencer, my 7-year-old, he was banged up pretty good. He had broken his wrist. His ribs were all bruised up, but he physically walked away from the accident. I mean, I'm sure they carried him away, but he was physically okay. Emotionally, he thought the whole family was gone. Mm. I had to be extricated from the car and airlifted or life flighted to the nearest level 1 trauma center. But I didn't know any of that. I knew I'd crashed. I knew half the family had passed. I knew I'd said this profound goodbye and made a choice to come back. And here I am moving about the hospital. And I'm aware, almost a 360-degree awareness. I'm aware of the doctors and the nurses and the other patients and the families of the other patients. I mean, I'm aware in such a way that I feel a oneness. I feel a connection. I mean, there was a nurse that passes me in the hallway. I mean, she's completely unaware of me, but I am so aware of her. I mean, I knew her life. I felt her life. I knew her love, her motivations, her hate, her challenges, her thoughts. We were one. I was her and she was me. And I even felt and was aware of the abuse she'd received as a child. Like, wow, I felt the abuse she had received as a child. But in that same instant, it's like I saw her magnificence. It's like, look at her, in the hospital, helping, healing, serving. And this was true of everyone I encountered. Just this absolute connection, this oneness, and this magnificence. I felt I'm seeing them as God sees us, as the divine views us. I grew up in a conservative Christian home. I even had a biblical verse come to me in that moment, which was the famous verse where, Jesus said, "In as much as you've done it unto the least of one of these, you've done it unto me." And, there was the question, well, how did we do it to you? Well, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was naked, you clothed me. And I always thought that was a nice verse about being nice, but I was experiencing this at a whole different level. Then I realized, oh my goodness, now I see the layers of what was being communicated there. I am them. They are me. We are one. And perhaps when Jesus was saying that, he was saying, I am the man in prison. I am the beggar in the street. I am the stranger that simply wants acceptance. And that's what I was feeling. It was a complete oneness. Words are difficult, perhaps, to explain this, but I was one with everything around me, and I was seeing it at a much higher perspective.
That's
until
amazing.
it changed me. It changed me. And I was experiencing this until I came upon a body, a man laying on the gurney that I didn't feel that from, which I thought was strange. And that's when I stepped closer to look. And that's when I realized, oh my goodness, that's me. I mean, that wasn't me. I was having this connected, profound experience, but there was my body. And I knew I was to get back in, and it was a mess. I mean, it was an absolute mess. I described the injuries. And I had this reverence. I had this realization. It's like, wow, I always took it for granted. I never even thought about my heart just beating on its own. I didn't have to think about my lungs breathing. I didn't have to teach my eyes how to see. I was looking at this miracle machine of a body and thinking, wow, how did I take it for granted? How did I not honor even more this magnificent skin suit that we have our life experience in? And yet it was a mess, and I had to get back in. And again, I didn't have to figure that out. It's just like, okay, I'm going back in. I've made the choice. I'm going back in. I gave my word. I got to go get well. And boom, then I'm back in the body, but back to the denseness, the heaviness. I mean, the pain, the trauma, the sorrow, the guilt, the regret. I mean, all of it was so heavy, so heavy.
Jeff, tell me, when you were there, and you said the question I had before was, what was the very first thing you remember after, I guess, you were dead, so you died? What was the very first thing you remember after that?
Well, the first thing was Tamara coming, my wife, and having this communication. I mean, that was the first thing I remember. Or it was the surprise of, wow, how am I okay? What just happened?
So the near-death experience, that portion was positive.
That portion was very positive. Yeah. And there's more to it. I mean, I had profound things happen. I mean, I was in the hospital for almost 6 months. I mean, I had 18 surgeries and all putting me back together. I was in ICU for a couple months. I mean, I had horrible infections. I was throwing pulmonary emboli, the blood clots that lodged in my lungs. There was a profound experience that's of interest too. When I was life flighted into this trauma center, there was a doctor and a nurse that also had a profound experience at the same time. And the miracle is that they came in when I was out of ICU and in surgical recovery. They came to see me, and they shared what had happened, which is probably a miracle. They would tell you, we were moved upon, like we were nudged by spirit to go tell you. They didn't know me from Adam, but both the doctor and the nurse told me they experienced my wife's soul, or her spirit, in that operating room, in that arena. And I hadn't, they didn't know I had a profound experience. And they simply came in, they said, wow, it's good to see you're doing better. We didn't know if you were going to make it. There was small talk at first, but then the nurse started crying. And she said, we got to tell you why we came. And she shared that they had experienced my wife's spirit in the operating room. And I immediately looked over at the doctor, and he said, yeah. And his name is Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll. He's written books on this now, but he said, I saw your wife's soul.
Oh my.
She communicated with me. And I said, what did she communicate? And he said, she simply shared her gratitude for everything we were doing to save your life. And I burst into tears. I said, of course she did. That's exactly how she is. But they didn't know I'd made this deal. They didn't know I had made this deal to come back, and that I had to live, to raise our son. And so there was little things like that, which, are somewhat unique. I mean, I know what the skeptics say. Well, you were injured, your blood was, not running through your brain, the oxygen shut down in your brain, you were hallucinating. But the profound experiences were at the scene of the accident like that. And then probably even a more profound experience was at the end of my hospital stay. So, I was on morphine and everything else during those traumatic times in ICU. But then at the end of my hospital stay, when I was off of the heavy narcotics and just about ready to come home, I went to sleep one night in my hospital bed, and I was finally able to lay on my side. They had repaired all the abdominal injuries. They had put a colostomy bag. But anyway, even those abdominal injuries had laid open for months because of the infections. They had to heal it from the inside out. But I could finally lay on my side, which is my natural way of sleeping, and I fell sound asleep. And it's funny, I'd laid so long on my back, I'd rubbed all the hair off the back of my head. My head was bald, and I was still grieving so miserably. Just grief. It's a heavy one. But I fell asleep. I went into a deep sleep, and the strange thing is I was conscious. I was aware that I was sleeping peacefully. It's like, wow, I'm really sleeping peacefully. I don't know if I've slept peacefully for months. Certainly I slept and was unconscious.
Yeah.
I was aware in my sleep, and that light came again. The same light as at the accident, this healing, tangible, powerful light. And again, it felt like I was rising above the hospital bed. But this time the light, it like dispensed, it went away. And I was just in the most beautiful place. There's what people say, heaven, the spirit world, the other side. Mm-hmm. The only word that comes close to what I was experiencing is I was home. I was home. It was so familiar, so welcoming, so beautiful. And I was whole. I had both legs, both feet, and I joyfully began to run. And it was interesting because it was such a physical experience. Like I could wiggle my toes. I could feel the energy. I could feel the life of the ground beneath my feet. I could feel the intelligence in my calves and my thighs. And I'm like, I'm home and I'm whole and I'm joyfully running about and feeling it in a very, very physical way. And then I just had the knowing I'm not here to stay. And at that point, there was this corridor, off to my left. And I knew intuitively I'm to go that way. And so I began making my way down that corridor. And at the end of the corridor was a crib. Now Griffin, my youngest son, just a toddler when he passed, he was still sleeping in a crib. And he was sneaking out of it and up to mischief at night and all that goes with it. But when I saw this crib, I thought, could it be? And I rushed to the crib and I looked in, and there he was, sleeping as beautiful as when I'd glanced in the rearview mirror. He was beautiful. He was healthy. And, as a father, I swept him up. I wanted to hold him and I picked him up. And again, it was so physical. I don't know if you've ever picked up a sleeping child, but there's a weight, there's a heat to him. And I was experiencing all of that. Like I'm holding him against me, and I can feel his ribs expanding, and I can feel his breath on my neck. And I leaned over and I smelled his hair, like all of the senses. I'm like, that's my boy. I'm smelling his hair, and I began to weep holding him. And as I was holding him, weeping, thinking, wow, do I really get to hold him one more time? Do I really get to be here with him? I felt this presence coming up behind me, and it was an overwhelming, powerful, cosmic presence. And I'm sitting there holding my son, and the presence is coming closer and closer. And given my upbringing, I'm thinking that's God. And the guilt began to bubble up in me. I'm thinking I'm holding my boy, and he's here because I crashed the car. He's here because I dozed off, or I overcorrected, or I screwed up, and his life was cut so short. And, this presence is closer and closer till it's right behind me. And I'm having all these guilt feelings. And as I felt the presence right behind me, and I'm weeping, holding my son, and just grieving over all that had taken place, I had this thought. And the thought was, I hope I can be forgiven. And that's when the whole lid just came off. Like there was a download. And it felt almost physical too. It's like these divine arms just wrapped around and held me and my boy.
Wow.
There was just so much love, so much peace, so much trust, so much.
So that was God.
Yeah, that's what I call God. I was still afraid. I didn't want to turn around, but I was feeling this. It was almost as if we became one. It's like, wow, we just melded in. And this thought I had of, I hope I can be forgiven. The first communication was, there's nothing to forgive. Everything's in divine order. And I'm like, oh, that can't be. I mean, he's here, and here I am arguing with God, right? And then my life began to play out. I was literally, I've learned it's called the life review, but I was seeing my life, and I saw my parents' divorce, and I saw the insecurities that created. I saw how I became that overachiever. I'm going to get the grade, make the team, get the girl, to prove I'm enough and okay. And yet I was seeing it in different eyes. I was seeing it in pure love. And I saw things, but I thought, well, that was a mistake. I didn't mean to do that. And God says to me, but what did you learn? There was no judgment, no comparison. It's just like, what did you learn from that? How did your soul expand? And I saw things and I thought, well, that was wrong. I knew it was wrong and I did it anyway. And it was communicated to me, well, that's your judgment of it. We love you. I mean, here I am holding my boy, and I'm hearing this, that's your judgment of it. What did you learn? All this love and all this peace and all this support. And I'm holding my child, and I'm thinking, he's perfect. He's beloved. He is divine. And yet I'm in the arms of the divine, and I'm realizing, wow, that's, and it was personal, but I knew it rippled out to every living soul. That's how loved we are.
Jeff, prior to this, a couple of people asked some questions. Did you believe in God? Did you believe in Jesus? Were you a Christian? Or you just like very model, you go every now and then for holidays to church?
No, I was devout. I was every Sunday going to church. And yet the shift for me was, I believe I was going out of fear. Well, I better please God. I better do the right thing. I better be a good person. I grew up believing that life was a test and God was going to judge me. And I was most likely failing the test. And yet here I am in the arms of God, and there's so much love. In fact, when I had the thought as well, it's like, wow, I really failed the test. I crashed the car and half the family died. I've really failed the test. And the community.
Would you say right now that you're a reborn Christian?
I might say I'm expanded.
Yes.
This expanded everything. And yes, I'm still, I'm still very much a Christian, but I see the beauty in Buddhism and in Hinduism and in Judaism. I mean, I realized in the arms of the divine, we're far more alike as manifestations of the divine than we are different. I mean, we all have these belief systems and these things that we hold on to, but somehow in those arms, it's like, wow. I mean, here I'm holding my son who's just a toddler, and he's learning to walk and he's wandering about and he's slobbering and bumping his head. And I felt so much love. It's like, wow, maybe the whole universe just celebrates. Look at my children. They're learning to walk. And I felt so beloved. And in so much, the energy of life wasn't a test. It was a gift. It was an absolute gift. And there was nothing but love. So I would say it expanded.
Expanded your.
Yeah, and maybe not and reborn's a great word. I mean, words, here again, words, what's the define, how do you define it? What's the meaning behind the word? Even love, what does that mean? I love a good steak. I love that movie. Oh, I love my boy. Oh, God's love was something so big. I don't know if there's words, but my belief, my faith, seemed to just transform into absolute trust. It's like we are so loved. And that was, and
Did you see angels or anything when you were over there on the other side?
That's such a beautiful question. It felt like, and I've attempted to explain this. Now, I had encountered my deceased wife. I had encountered my deceased son, who both were very much alive. But as I was having this experience, it felt like there was concourses of angels. It felt like when those arms came around me that, and these are just words again, but it felt like I was in an arena and there was just concourses of angels and the entire universe observing, watching, supporting, loving. It was very personal in these arms of God. And yet it felt like the whole universe was observing it and honoring it.
Have you read any books about near-death experience? I read a couple of years ago. I think it was Peck was the psychiatrist. He wrote a couple of really good books. And one I read was from Kenneth Ring, but he was comparing near-death experience to alien abduction, which was a wholly different thing. But have you read any books on this topic since this happened?
I have. Now, it's interesting because I held it very tight for a while, and I wasn't even sure what a near-death experience was. And I did eventually read a book. It was, it was Return from Tomorrow by George Ritchie, I believe, was the first near-death experience. And I was like, oh, wow, wait a minute. That sounds a little bit like what maybe I experienced. Now I've read many at this point, but I wrote my own personal memoir, and when that came into the space, it's like, well, I don't want to be influenced. I've got to keep this pure.
Yeah.
But now, and I've become friends with people like Eben Alexander and Anita Morjani and Dr. Mary Neal, and I've read all kinds of near-death experience books, and they're as unique, our experiences are as unique as our lives are.
Yeah.
But the commonality seems to be this unconditional love, and perhaps, a guide, an angel, a divine being, God, if you will, that there's an encounter with. So,
for Jen Nicassio and people that have listened to the show, when I was on the show a couple of years ago, I think Sean Kelly said something about he had a near-death experience. Yeah. But this is the thing that concerned me. And I kept saying to him, you got to become a reborn Christian. You got to go change your opinion about God and stuff. His experience was so dark and negative that, he gave the impression that when he had the near-death experience, he went to hell. He went to Hades.
Yeah.
It was so dark. And I said, man, you better do something about this right now. And it seems like in everyone's life, something happens, more traumatic for you than most people, but there's that opportunity where you turn to God, and that's where I said reborn. You could be the best Christian, but something will happen where you now are 100% and you're reborn. And I think Jesus even said that you have to get reborn at some point. Yeah. And people get that chance. Yours was the most traumatic.
Yeah, maybe I'm thick-headed, John, and I had to really get kicked in the head to get it. But I'm not opposed to reborn. Yeah, reborn, renewed, expanded, whatever words you want to use. But yeah, it really did open up, and there was something that happened that I hesitated to share for so long, and I can talk about it tonight, but. In those arms of God, this was really, I got a tutorial on choice, because here I am holding my son and I'm in those divine arms. And what was communicated to me, and here again, I often hesitate to share this, but God said to me, I want you to exercise your will.
Free will.
I'm like, my will? It's your will be done. I've known this since I was a child, and I had been kind of in that energy of, why would you do this? Why? And God says, I want you to exercise your will. And it was communicated. There were words spoken, but a lot of it was just pure energy. I was told, you could be mad at God your whole life, because this happened and this was allowed to happen. And where was God when, I dozed off at the wheel and I was told that's okay. You're loved anyway. And you can also beat yourself up for the rest of your life because you were driving the car, and that's okay. You're loved anyway. But then I was given a different choice. I was told, you can choose to give your son to me. You can choose to trust and hand him over. And maybe it won't feel like he was taken away. In fact, you can give both your wife and your son to me, and therefore exercise your will. And I'm like, but it's your will be done. And what was communicated in this, God said, my will is your will. That's how much you're loved. My will is that you have free will, that you get to choose. And that blew my mind. And yet in all that love and all that beauty and all that peace and all that oneness, I kissed my little boy and I handed him over.
Yeah.
Choice. Yeah.
In the research I've done on this, there are a number of things. It's like 6, 7, 8 points I remember. Is that it's near-death experience is something that happens one time, right? Obviously, how many times you're going to go through a traumatic accident or fall out a window. So it happens one time. It's a positive experience. Well, 93% of the time you meet a relative and it's a very positive experience. You're given a choice to return. There were a number of other factors, but you've hit on every one of those. This is exactly what happens in near-death experiences.
Yeah. Wow. And it's funny. I mean, my friends say your own wife kicked you out of heaven, brother. That's what happened, but it was for a cause. Yeah. It was for a reason. And, as I let go and boom, then back to the hospital bed and the amputation and the injuries and all of that. But here's
something else that I've read, and also myself, I had a reborn experience thing, but mine was scared straight because an entity showed up in the house, and I believe it was a demon. It was a fallen angel. But I hadn't been in church in 20 years, and it scared me straight. I became a reborn Christian. But on the contact, I started having the ability of premonitions. I knew when my first grandson was born, I was waking up, and a woman said, he's in a field of butterflies right now. And I wake up, I look at my phone. Oh, no, your daughter's in a field of butterflies. Look at my phone. My daughter said, she's at the hospital. She's in labor. So, and then later when I went for the baptism out in St. Louis, after it was done, we were getting in the car. I had this overwhelming feeling we're getting in an accident and this child is going to get hurt. And I wish I would have said something. I knew this was going to happen. And I said to my daughter, put a pillow on the side of his car seat and I'm going to ride with you. There were 4 of us going to the sister's house. We're the third car. We go through the light. I turn to the left. Here's a car running the light, T-bones us right on the kid's side. But it hit right at the doors. So that was the strongest point. The baby cried like your son that survived, and everybody else had whiplash, but he was okay. But I've had so many of these paranormal experiences. They've kind of faded away now because that was back in 2018. And so did you have any abilities that you're still connected to the spirit world?
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And yes, I did. Now I'm a normal guy. I get up, I still go to work full time, but I have had, if I have gifts, I've had dreams and visions of my loved ones. I mean, gosh, Tamara comes to me or has come to me in dreams. Griffin, my youngest son, has come to me in dreams. And when I say visions, I may not have been sleeping, but he's so present. And he doesn't come as a toddler. He comes as a full-grown, almost guardian angel. Oh. And so that's happened. Maybe the biggest gift is I just came back with perhaps a deeper capacity to love and more compassion and more empathy and just seeing the little things as big things. I mean, people have said, oh, you must have been spared for some great cause. And I'm like, yeah, to play catch with my son.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
to watch that sunset or that butterfly or that flower or that snowstorm. I don't have that gift, John, of seeing the future. I have had premonitions. I have been warned of things. I have been comforted in things, but that's just it. We all have different gifts. It's the uniqueness, the feet can't say to the head, I have no use for you. I mean, we all have different gifts, and then together we are whole.
Well, you said something important also when you did your life review. Well, that's another one of the factors is there's this review of your life that happens in near-death experiences. But you said that the Spirit or God was saying to you, what did you learn? Here's your life. These are the things you did. What did you learn? This is, for me, it's like, what other questions did he ask? Because I'd like to know,
Here's the interesting thing, and this was something that was communicated to me, because I was very much, I was a little bit frightened. I mean, I had this fear. I didn't dare turn around. I also was looking at things and experiencing so much love. I was asked a question, and this is the only question I was asked, beyond what did you learn? Well, that's your judgment. But the one question that was so resoundingly powerful was, I was asked, to what degree have you learned to love? What degree have you learned to love? And that's, I'm gray now, and it's been 28 years since the accident. I couldn't even speak of it for a decade. I'd just cry. But I'm leaning into that space now of, wow, to what degree have I learned to love? And now it's time to begin to love me. I mean, the forgiveness, to let go of in the accident, the self-love of taking care of me. And well, here again, the master said, love your neighbor as yourself. And it's like, well, no wonder I'm angry with the neighbor if I can't even love myself. Then I can only give what I have within me. And so I'm still learning. I'm still learning from that experience 28 years later. And I think what I'm learning in this portion or chapter of my life is self-love, to love myself a little bit more.
That one commandment, to love thy neighbor as yourself. You know how many times I've gone to bed and I've said to God, say my prayers, Jesus, I just can't do that one.
That's a hard one.
It's impossible because people always betray you. My life is so void of love right now. It's almost everyone in my life has betrayed me at some point. Good friends, everybody in the political field, in the UFO field, and I just say, it's like, I can't find neighbors and friends anywhere, at the gym, anywhere, that I trust them, because something will happen and I find out they betrayed me. That is the one commandment that I just tell God I can't do it. I can't do it.
I know betrayal. I do know betrayal.
Yeah.
And John, that's a tough one. And maybe it's only maybe that's postgraduate studies. It's like, okay, we passed high school, we might have a degree, but now we get to step into the postgraduate studies.
Yeah.
Jeff, what do you say to the skeptics who think it's some kind of brain chemistry thing that happened and you didn't really die?
I really have no agenda. I don't care if they believe it or not. I'm not. I mean, it's interesting. I was never going to share this, and there are skeptics, and I'm pretty thick-skinned. It just rolls off. And I say, this is very real to me. Yeah, but I had Spirit whisper to me about 10 years after the accident. I was told, share your experience and others will heal. I thought, so if it's not about me, that's great. Then I can share. And if people heal, of course we need healing. But when people are skeptical, it's just like, that's okay. I love them where they're at. I'm not trying to prove anything to them. And if I experienced love, then I can be as loving to them as I am to the ones that embrace me and say, oh, wow, tell us more.
And what could you say to someone grieving right now? And what would it be?
Ooh, well, keep breathing. And this is another thing I've learned, and grief. Grief may be the most magnificent manifestation of love. Grief is love. We only grieve because we love so deeply. Our grief is so painful because we loved so powerfully. And, as I embraced that, that was something that allowed me baby steps through it, and that our loved ones are never gone. They don't die. They're very much alive. I think they look out for us. I think they cheer us on. I think they probably, mine probably laugh at me a lot, as I muddle through this thing we call life. But yeah, keep breathing and honor the grief as love, because it truly is.
Exactly. They say that the only problem with loving someone is to grieve them when they leave. That's the sad part about love.
Yeah.
What are we going to do?
Well, one of the ways I've always looked at this type of stuff, because, like you said, you're beating yourself up for years. You're feeling guilt. You feel that, it's almost like if you walk into a store to buy something and the store gets held up, and, or if somebody, they put a gun to me, my response would be, you understand, if you kill me, I immediately go to heaven. You don't. So it's like the people that pass, I don't want to say as victims, but, they go to heaven. They go, your kids, your wife, they went to heaven. They did. That's where they went, so that's the way I viewed it, because we don't know why these things happen. But the person that I would just use the term victim, whatever, they went to heaven. That's where they went, so that's the way you got to look at it. And you were basically told that, give them to me and I'm taking them to heaven. So, so they're okay. They're okay.
And your son needed his father. Well, that's why.
And you needed to be here,
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, I want to thank you so much for coming on Chasing Prophecy. It was a great time listening to your story. I mean, it chokes me up every time I hear it. And
is there any time left, Jenny?
Yeah, we have a few minutes.
I just want to throw out there, because I know people watch this show are into the paranormal, they're into UFOs and that type of stuff. But in one of the things, I did an analysis of, I mentioned Kenneth Ring. He looked at near-death experience and alien abduction, and I did a analysis of like demonic infestation versus near-death. And the demonic infestation and the alien abduction had 70% overlap of the things that happen, and they were almost totally opposite of the near-death experience, and just from what I can remember. So you have, let's say, the alien abduction or the demonic, experience, infestation. So what happens is, the near-death experience, you're met by a relative, right? Mm-hmm. And it's positive. The other two, you're met by some sort of creature, and it's negative, right? You get a choice to come back if you have an alien abduction or the demonic infestation. There is no choice. It almost like claims you, and it's really, really hard to break this tie to it, And there were so many factors there that those two, which is what we talk about a lot, and I write my books on, they're so negative, but the near-death experience, it's positive. You meet relatives, you get a choice to come back. You don't get any of those choices.
Not all the time, though. There's some, I've read some scary stuff about people who pass and go the other place. And
but it's not a lot. It's only 7%. It's 93%. It's a positive experience. Near death.
Well, depending, they might be a very bad person.
Well, I mean, I have a friend, or we've had an association. I've sat and had dinner with him, Howard Storm, and he had a very negative, hell-like experience, but then was delivered out of that, and it changed his life.
It changed him after that.
And I think maybe the bottom line is, wow, whether these alien abductions, these negative things, these demonic things, these very heavenly and these things of light, these divine things, maybe we can just embrace that there's something bigger than we are, and we get to choose
Mhm.
and can't control what goes on in the world. I can only control how I respond to my experiences. And if I respond in a way that is love, then I expand, I increase, I go. And this is a bit off topic. Here I'm in Utah. I'm in the Wasatch Back up, in the Wasatch Rocky Mountains of Utah. We've had UFO sightings all week long. I mean, it's been
Really?
it's been people videoing it. I've had.
I'm gonna have to go. You have any videos? Send them to me.
Well, I will. I'll send you the video. There was a thing. There's been these bright lights in the sky. I had dear friends say, "Go outside and look up." And I saw them with my eye. They videoed them. I didn't. But then my mother sent me something from southern Utah saying, "Look what's on the news," because I was telling her we're seeing these crazy lights.
Oh wow!
And, I'm here again. There's skeptics there too. Well, that could be a secret military ops, and we just don't know what craft
and
is.
that's what I think it is. I do think that's what it is.
It could be. It
Most
could
of
be.
those military. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we've had strange lights in the skies and in the skies of Utah.
Are they like the drones that people said they on TikTok? They were all talking about drones, like about what was that in the wintertime?
Yeah, I don't
know.
Early in the year, that was back in January.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like I say, I embrace it. There's something bigger than we are. I don't have all the answers, and I'm still learning. And who knows, what all that looks like. That's bigger than who we are and what we know. It's
a lot of stuff.
It's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling at times.
Yes, it is, and we talk about all the stuff that's not normal on here. There's a lot of stuff out there that's just simply we can't explain it.
Well, I think one of the tests also, like you'll come across times in your life where you can help people. And, I consider myself sometimes kind of cold and hard, but anytime I've come across somebody that I really, rather than giving money to a charity, I see a person that needs help, I'll just gift them $1,000 or $2,000, and they are so stunned that I handed them a check. I know you need this, like I was down in Puerto Rico visiting relatives, and my aunt is saying, well, when you see your cousin, she's got a growth here, and right away, and they're talking, well, it might be cancerous. And I said, I'm paying for the operation. As soon as I see her, I'm paying for the operation. I don't care how much it costs. And then it came out in the conversation. She's been tested. It's just a goiter. It's not, it's not cancer. But those are the reactions. Like God would say, what'd you learn? What were you going to do? Well, I was going to help the person. But and then, like I've said, so many times I've helped these people. Out of the blue, they didn't ask me for money. I handed them a check to help them because I knew. And then a couple of years later, they betrayed me. And that's why that love thy neighbor. It is so hard to react with love. It is for me.
I can't understand that one. I don't understand because it's so hard to. Like, how am I supposed to love my neighbor? Am I supposed to go over there and do? I don't understand that. I mean, just to be nice to them.
And then a week later, the neighbor's going to call the police because your dog's barking at night. Yeah. I mean, it's like this happens so much, at least in my life. It's like.
Does he mean literally your neighbor, or does he mean like
anybody
in general?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's an interesting thing. I mean, in my biblical study, he was asked, well, who's my neighbor? And he told the story of the Good Samaritans, which the Samaritans were hated, by the Jew. I mean, they were enemies. They were not alike. And it was the Samaritan. I mean, the people, here's a Jewish man beaten on the side of the street, and his own high priest and religious leaders pass him by. But his enemy, the Samaritan's the one that stops, dresses his wounds, takes him to the hospital, pays the bill. And John, I'll classify you as a good Samaritan. I mean, you're paying the bill, you're doing your thing, you're taking care of and caring for people you don't even know. And they may turn on you, but you know what? Your reward is so much bigger than how they feel or what they do. I mean, as I tell that story, well, who's my neighbor? Well, you've done just what biblically the Good Samaritan did. You've supported strangers, perhaps.
Yeah, I felt
just needed a hand up. And
my intent was pure. And if you're going to turn it on me, then that's on you. It's not on me.
That's right. That's not on you, because you didn't do it and want anything back.
No, and I never even asked these people to pay me back, but
Yeah.
it's tough,
Jeff, where can somebody find your books and anything else about you they can
Oh,
read?
yeah.
about-
The books are on Amazon. My personal memoir is Knowing by Jeffrey Olsen. My son and I collaborated on a children's book recently, and
Oh,
it's called Where Are You? It's written he's a grown man now. He's married. He's made me a grandfather. I got a little grandson wandering around now.
awesome.
But he wrote Where Are You? We wrote it together, but it's a children's book. However, gosh, it has been really successful. I mean, some guys golf, some guys fish. We wrote a book, but we've realized it's probably perfect for anybody who misses someone. But they're both on Amazon, or I do have a website. It's Envoy Publishing, ENVOY publishing.com, and you can get the books and order them from there.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Very good. Well, I wish you luck, Jeffrey. It all ends up positive in the end. I think you already know that.
Yeah, I mean that's just it. The world's a crazy place, but
Yeah.
From my experience, we're in really good hands. We're in really good hands. So,
That's great to hear. That's awesome. Makes me feel good. I have a lot of people over on the other side. But thank you again for joining us on Chasing
you.
John. Thank you for co-hosting. I appreciate it. Hope you can come back next time. I know you
Yeah.
go away a lot.
As long as I'm in town.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
We'll
guys.
see you next
Yep.
time.
All
Thanks
righty.
again,
Take care.
Jeffrey.
Yep.
Nice
Bye-bye.
talking to you, Jeff.